Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Do you struggle with being negative? Most people struggle with being negative. Being positive takes action. Using simple positive actions will allow you to win each day. Being negative is a discharge in three key areas. Number one, your mindset to achieve your goals. Number two, your influence on self and others. And number three, your ability to learn and grow. Implementing simple positive actions into your life will allow you to win each day. Being positive takes action. So let's work to be positive. To receive a weekly video email from me on one simple positive action, subscribe to the series by going to chargepodcast.com to get the link to register today. Life is short, so why live your life by default when you can live your life by design? Make it a great day. Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again today for another great podcast. I love bringing different guests with different viewpoints so you get to learn. And today, that's our challenge too, because we've really talked about, we've got a challenge right now in the workplace. And we've got to figure out as business owners, how are we going to make that change? And also, it's not just the business owners. It's the leaders that are working within those organizations, because the business world is changing, just like education, just like government, just like everything. Our world is changing, so we have to change with it. So today's topic is going to be very practical for you. So make sure you stay tuned for it, because Sam's going to give us some great information. But I'm going to let Sam share with us, what problem will you solve for our Charge Podcast listeners today?
We are tackling employee engagement and retention, Gary.
All right. I love employee engagement and retention because it's a big topic today, and it's one we've got to do a better job on. I've got with me today Sam Feeney. He is the Chief Strategy Officer for Real Frequency. They're a career and college consulting company based in Spokane, Washington. He is also the author of Why Aren't You Thriving? It's a personal development book for men, which will be released in January of 2023. He and his family live in suburban Denver. It is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Gary. I'm excited to be here, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Well, I am too, because some may not know, but we're in a mastermind together because we're learning from each other, because you can always learn. And that's what I love about podcasts, is people can learn. And you talked about that, increasing employee engagement and reducing turnover. And boy, that's a challenge today in the workplace, because we've all heard about the great resignation and all the challenge coming with it, and hybrid workforce versus, in-seat workforce, and how are we going to manage all these changes? So I think where I'm going to start from, Sam, if it's okay, is what am I as a business owner assuming that my employees want? How do I know that?
Yeah, that's great. And I think this is what's happened so much. And I actually even experienced this myself. I was a participant in the Great Resignation. I wanted something different after 20 years as an educator. And so my employer at the time, and then who I think a lot of employers are right now, is they're assuming two things when they hire somebody, or when they're looking to keep employees, which is really a challenge for people right now. It's almost an unspoken thing. As guys, I'm really good at just ignoring a problem and hoping it'll go away.
It doesn't.
I don't recommend it. So I think a lot of business owners might have that tendency. And so we really are thinking that our employees want a job that fits their skills, and then that they want the compensation and the time off somewhere along that continuum. Those two factors, really, we call it skills and lifestyle. Most employers think that that's all that their employees are looking for. And that's one of the premises I really want to challenge early on, is that there's probably something more.
Yeah, there definitely is today. And we have to understand, as employers, we may have not had to deal with this just a short 3 years ago. I'm not even going to say 5.
Yeah.
3 years ago. And there's always these cycles, I believe, Sam, that, things ebb and flow. I always
Sure.
tell business owners when business is really good, they have a harder time getting their people. But when business is not very good, of course, you may be able to get your people, but the challenge is you don't have the business that need as many of them.
Right.
But today, I think we're really seeing a change because the workplace is changing, because it's not the same. And the thing is, you live in suburban Denver. I live in a smaller community, central Missouri. Jefferson City, Missouri is about, 40,000 people, 70 some thousand in the county. Those people are not readily available like they were before. And I think that becomes a key factor. So how can I find those employees that really are a good fit for my company?
Yeah, that's a big challenge. And I think one thing that caught a lot of employers by surprise was you generally think there's a fixed number of employable people, and that number more or less will be available to everybody. So you think, okay, maybe somebody else is doing great, so maybe I'm taking a dip right now. That balance will kind of come back in those ebbs and flows, as you mentioned. But we're finding that a lot of people are kind of just opting out, or they're really focusing on a gig economy, freelancing, whatever it might be. And so what a lot of employers have felt was a fairly static thing, which is the number of available people, that has changed. And so the dynamic in that way, if there are a set number of available people, I can just say, hey, you know what? All I need to do is maybe raise my initial salary by $5,000, and I'll start to tap into that number. But really, it's not the employable people are not at other people's companies right now. They're on their own. And so part of that, there's a lot of ways to reframe this and think about it. But one is I really love the referral network, because if you like the people you have, I recommend, they usually like working with people who they already know. So there's a referral network part there. And I think there's an industry or an opportunity, for companies to think differently about their positions, and to start maybe sub-segmenting some of their positions to go find the gig economy workers by saying, hey, I had this role. This role might be 3 different jobs. I can go post on those, go at Upwork or wherever, and maybe fill those roles and not have to pay benefits. I don't know, if they're doing that. Right. So that's a way to think about it just a little bit differently, because it's not this flat playing surface anymore. It's becoming 3 and 4 dimensional, I think.
Well, I really like how you state that, because really it's thinking differently as a business owner, where we used to think we have to have this one role, do these 5 things.
Yes.
And the only challenge that we have there, and I know you've got some experience on this, is the problem is most times they don't have all 5 of those skills.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So you're hiring somebody who's got 60% of what you want.
Yeah.
and then you've got
other 2,
them
they actually, let's use the word, they suck at it, but they get through it because, of course, that's what the role says. Right. Well, you can really change that up with some of the resources that's out there today. And I think you even have a resource that's available, and you might share that a little bit. Sure. Is how do we take those skills and try to identify some of those skills that the people that we're bringing into our organization, and really even the people that we have in our organization.
Right. Right. Yeah. Sometimes you'll find there's a number of different ways to do it, but sometimes you'll find you've got the right people. They're just sitting on the wrong seat of the bus. Right. Yeah. There's something about that and so I will say, even though we started talking at the outset about employees typically want more than just to be able to use their skills and be compensated for it, the skills part is a pretty big deal. And I think that might be something that business owners can start to look at, to say, can we do a bit of a reassessment on where I have my people? Because my hope is this is one of the career factors that I'm probably the one I'm most fan of, as you would know, Gary, from hanging out with me, is the personal growth part of wanting to be able to change because of where I work. And so if you hire somebody 5 years ago, if you've done a good job developing them, they may be ready for a different role or a different set of skills to be used in their day-to-day, which then gets them more excited, gets them engaged. And now you could bring somebody else in to fill the spot where they were.
Yeah. And I think the other problem is, if you haven't been developing them, then you're offering the door to them, because for a lot of people, they're leaving positions if they're not growing within their own position. And everybody's heard the old saying, if I train them, they'll leave. Well, If I don't train them, they stay. There's a problem both ways.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want the leftovers in this. Like that's one of the things that most excites me about looking at career satisfaction, employee engagement differently, is because we're just playing a different game, right? Like it's like when I teach my kid a sport, there's like the level that I teach him that at the outset, it feels like maybe other sports he's played, but as he gets better at it, it becomes more and more differentiated and unique from other sports. That's how lacrosse at high levels is totally different from soccer, from water polo, from, swimming, whatever it might be. That has to be in place. And so I think we need to start playing by different rules as business owners as well.
Okay. So I think we've helped shift that mindset shift, hopefully for the business owners. And I say for leaders, because I know leaders listen to this podcast too. And sometimes it's tough because, we get stuck in our routine. I mean, I was with a business owner just the other day and I said, they were bringing a higher level leadership into their organization. I said, I know you know how to onboard your team, but this one's going to be different than anything else you've ever brought into your team. And I said, it has to be at that same high level that you bring them in. So let's talk about some practical ways you think that we can do to keep our best employees. And maybe at the same time, we talk about not only our best employees, but if we're bringing them in, how do we get those best people?
Yeah. And that's really at the core of this revisioning of employee engagement. And one of them is identifying, hey, if there's more than just what they do every day and how much they get paid, what are those different factors? That's why we call them the career factors. We talk about your working environment. We talk about the connections of their colleagues, who they work with or for. And sometimes that's within the office. And sometimes that's a primary contract they're on, right? You've got to, if the primary contract somebody's working on every day is driving them nuts, they're gonna try to leave that contract and maybe your company. We also talk about that personal growth, as I talked about before, and it's very possible that some people are at their jobs because for them impact is a really big deal. So we've got 4 other factors along with these other skills. Our first step is twofold. One is helping people name why they're working, right? Because I think a lot of times we minimize it. But there's something more at it. We spend so much time at our jobs. We're doing so much in our day-to-day that has to do with career. There's a point in time where we say, you know what, I'd like this to mean something. Or one of my buddies, he said after his interview, he's really big on who I work with, right? On collegial relationships. He says, after I interview at a company, I always want to ask, can you go introduce me to the guy I'm going to be sitting next to for the next 2 years? Because that guy's going to have more of an impact on my career satisfaction than anything else. Yep. So naming what I love about the way that we help companies do this is we first give them a common language. And so everybody from the owner down to whomever they've outsourced janitorial work to has a career factors combination that's unique to them and that shows up differently in their lives. But the second part I really like, and this is what I think business owners enjoy, is I'm pretty big on telling employees that your job satisfaction is your fault. And it's not but that bold, just to wake them up a little bit, because so many employees have an external locus of control. They say, oh, well, if they did this, and if Gary would only do this. And I'm saying, look, you don't even really know what you're asking for from this job. And so once we name it, now you can start to say, hey, I bet you this factor's here. You just never knew to look for it. And so we start with that common language is a big, big deal for companies. And oftentimes we're kind of good there. And we just say, hey, we've given you that common language. Now you know what's bothering you that you couldn't name before. And so that's the engagement part. And then we just try to include that into the hiring process where people coming in, we know what we call them the CF3. Their top 3 career factors are. We know what they are, and so then they're named at the outset. And we know how to scratch that itch for them as they go through, and then it's just a reassess every year or two, see how they're doing and keep moving forward. So it's really a culture change that doesn't take a ton of time. It's just naming some of these different things that people are looking for from their jobs.
Yeah. And when we do that, of course, then it becomes a match because we know what we need to give them. And So many times employers sit out there and, well, I don't know what they need. And everybody doesn't need the same. That's the thing.
That's
You
the
gave me
coolest
the
part.
opportunity to take the assessment. So
Yes.
let's put this in practicality, if you don't mind, Sam, because I had in my area, growth was my number one. Impact was right behind it, and strengths was behind that. So let's just take the growth at this time.
Awesome.
So share with me, when I see the report and I see the growth, share with the audience, what is it actually telling us there?
Yeah, no, that's great. And what I'm just going to go back for 1 second to your point, Gary, because I love it. We've seen this, and it was kind of our theory before we were really starting to like, let's put some feet to this. But we've seen this before, where you can have 3 or 4 people working in the exact same role, doing the same job, who have a different CF3. They've got a different and that's kind of the fun part, like there's one person who's at this job for it. I think of the old story, and you come upon 3 bricklayers, and they're building a building right in front of you. And you ask the first one, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm laying bricks." And you ask the second one, and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a wall." And he asks the third one, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm building a cathedral." Right? They're all doing the same thing, but they're doing it for different reasons, and not one is inherently better than the other. So when somebody like I'll take this question from 2 different sides. Is one is for you, if you're somebody who says, "Hey, growth is my number one factor. It's just baked in me. I want to be able to be better because of what I do." The challenge to you then is to start to look for opportunities that your company already has to grow, either personally or professionally, and to be able to take them up on that. That will require more work from you, but it's very likely that your company already has something like that. And that can be experiential, like a leadership role. It could be some sort of classes they pay for, classes they offer, whatever it might be. Other side, the employer says, "Hey, I've got this guy, Gary. He's got a high growth career factor. What do I need to do to scratch that itch?" We propose to the vast majority of HR departments from companies big and small, that their fixes, their ways that they can address these, are very largely free and already exist, and usually just take some intentionality. And so oftentimes it's just, "Hey, you know what, guys, we're going to start a book of the month club. Gary's going to run it because this guy loves growth. We're going to start looking at some of our soft skills that come alongside, the hard skill stuff you've been hired to do." That's a $100 a month buying 5 or 10 books for people fix that keeps Gary around for a lot longer, and all of a sudden could elevate him to a C-suite.
Excellent. So like when we talk about, we'll pick one more and stuff on that side, because I got a couple other questions I want to ask you, but like in the impact area, when we're looking at impact, then what can we as employers do there if someone falls into that category?
I love impact because it's sneaky. It's something that, especially if you're not the person who founded the business, you're the second or third owner or CEO, whatever it might be. There's the Apostle Paul says in Revelation, he says, "Remember," something's wrong about that. It's not Revelation or Paul, one of the two. Anyway, somebody says somewhere in the Bible, it says, "Remember your first love." And there's something about a company returning to its mission statement, and maybe even remembering what the heck it is, and saying, "You know what, we are about something here." And finding, is there an alignment between what this company was founded on, or what we are doing now, and that person's desire for impact? It might not always be the case, right? This person wants to fight world hunger. They're really big on having their work mean something. And, you're selling widgets over here. So in your shoes, Gary, for impact, you say, "Hey, I want to find meaning in what I do." And so there's a second subset on this assessment that helps you figure out, well, what does that look like for me specifically? Do I want my work to actually affect people's lives in the work, that we do every day? Do I want, to fix a problem, maybe on a scale? I'm a big fan of scaling things. So, can we make this big? The company side, they can do something very simple as start rotating where they do charitable donations and say, "Hey, every February is Gary's month. He gets to pick the organization," whatever it might be, right? So they can find this way to see an impact and maybe even reach it mutually. There's the third one that we've used before, is just to say, "Hey, when we've got our days off, like we've got volunteer days off, we get to pick, Gary gets, you get 2 of the 8 days our company does to just volunteer in the area. Where in the area makes an impact for you. And so it doesn't have to be this monumental thing where you're not going to quit as an impact guy and go work for a nonprofit, in the Himalayas somewhere. You may be right where you're supposed to be in that company, and just, hey, if once a month, once a quarter, once a year, we do something that connects to the impact I want to have, that scratches that itch. It's usually not seismic.
Yeah, that's the key. And the big thing I love about what you're talking about, Sam, it's really taking things that we've talked about at the very get-go. The business is changing, the employees within it's changing it. It's more than we're no longer want to show up just for a job, right, or even what they called the career back then.
Yes.
We want to show up with more, and companies that are doing this are attracting those type of employees. So that's the key. That's the key behind it. And I think one of the things is how do you do this as a company? We've talked about, you just start implementing it in as you go. And you may be asking, well, how do I get this assessment or that? So Sam, why don't you share with them now, if they are interested in the Career Factors assessment, where could they go to be able to take some?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's free. It's just go to quiz.thecareerfactors.com. And the webpage itself is just thecareerfactors.com. So you can get some resources there. But if you want to take the assessment yourself, I think this is great for business owners just to say, why am I doing this? Like, what's my CF3? And so again, so quiz.thecareerfactors.com will be a quick assessment. Gets your results get emailed to you right away. And then you can start to understand a little bit more about what you're looking for from work, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. So we'll have that in show notes at chargepodcast.com, because we know their chargers are not sitting there just waiting to write down that website. So we make it easy for them there. But before we do that, I want to go through, because we talked about a book that you're going to have launching in January. We're going to have you back to talk more about this, Sam. But share with us, because it really is your impact that you're trying to make with Made to Thrive. So can you share a little bit about that and what we can kind of expect out of the book and what your impact you want that to be?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Impact is neck and neck with growth in my career factors for sure. And it's the book is called Why Aren't You Thriving? And it is not you really need to step up your game, but it's actually an invitation to. Right? I think some of the books that we can read end up kind of just making us feel worse because we're not doing as well as we could. But this is not written from the perspective of an expert. My face is not on the book cover because I have it all figured out. Far from it. But this is actually, I wanted to figure out how to go from good enough to really thriving. And I think there's an element there too of some books you've referenced in the past, but Gay Hendricks wrote a book called The Big Leap. Like, how do I go from my zone of competence to my zone of excellence? How do I just level up in my life? Because I remember when my wife asked me, I was in my early 30s and we already I had a good job. We had a nice house. Our first kid was home from the hospital, she asked me, she said, I don't mean anything by this, but is this all there is? And she's like, I love it. It's just, it happens so much faster than I thought it would. Like, we kind of got the big things in life checked off. And I thought to myself, my gosh, I can pretty accurately predict the next 4 decades of my life. And that is not inspiring to me. Like, there's got to be more. So what is it? So actually this book is a compilation of 39 interviews I did with guys from 7 different core areas. One of them's career, big fan of that. And it's just it's a conversation and an invitation to be able to excel in more than just one area of your life. Because I was really good at 1 or 2 areas and it was kind of just ignoring the other ones. And so, Why Aren't You Thriving comes out in January, and it will lead into a toolbox, I hope, of resources for guys who want to step up in areas of their life that maybe they've been ignoring for a while.
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad you're doing that. I can't wait to get you back, and we'll talk more about the book, but it's coming up in January. Thanks. Which, as we know, as time flies, it'll be here before we know
it's moving fast.
I'm sure Sam's feeling that more than we are right now, because I know those deadlines with books and published dates and trying to promote and everything that goes with that. We'll definitely have you back to be able to do that,
Thanks.
Sam. But one thing I want to ask, because you and I we're fellow mastermind members in our own mastermind. And because I do have a lot of business owners, as you know, I've started my own mastermind too, is why do you belong to a mastermind?
Yeah, I actually, it goes probably one of my favorite ideas is the jobs to be done theory. And it says anything we do, anything we purchase, we're hiring it to do a job. And so when I knew I was going to leave education, I went out and I found a mastermind group, and I told them straight out, I said, I'm hiring you to walk me through this transition because I have lone wolfed most of my life and I don't want to mess this up. So I was looking for a very specific outcome, and I'm staying because of how well that's gone.
Yeah. And that becomes basically, we term it as kind of a peer board of advisors is what it gives you. Other people that may have walked the path. Some of them may be farther on a journey. Some of them are just starting. And that's where I always bring that up, because as people know, they'll ask me, well, what do you do in a mastermind? And there's multifacets to it. Every mastermind is a little bit different. But the key is it's helping you on a path to where you want to go. I'm in a mastermind and I'm a little more matured in where my career is. But the difference I want something different out than maybe exactly what Sam. But the nice thing is we're in the same mastermind and we're both getting what we want out of it.
That's right. Yeah, there's something that I've seen too, that a lot of business owners, especially if they've experienced some success, they don't have what I call fertile soil. They don't. There's nobody around where they say, like, got all this. I remember when I first bought a home, I thought, should I become a real estate agent now? Because I just learned all this stuff. And I don't know why. Where else can I use this? And so I think people who've experienced success can find a lot of satisfaction by being able to pour into others. And maybe I think there are times where I've shared through my experience as a parent, and I think, man, I really kind of appreciate how far I've come just because I was able to help this guy who's just maybe 2 or 3 years behind.
Yeah. Well, great information. Share with them also, if you would, Sam. I know you've got a website for Made to Thrive. Give them that information. We'll have that in show notes for them too. So if they want to keep track of the upcoming book, I'm sure they can go there to be able to keep track of.
Yeah. It's madetothrive.coach. And then the podcast, which is the kind of the raw materials for the book, is Made to Thrive. It's on Apple and Spotify and all the other places you can get that.
We're going to have all that in show notes for you to make it easy. So go to chargepodcast.com. As you know, we've got great show notes there to make it easy for you to find what you want. So we'll have that, as well as the career factors assessment. Remember, if you heard right, he said that assessment is free. So you can go to it, take that assessment and get it for yourself. So as a business owner, you may be thinking, well, that'd be great for me. Well, go take it yourself. Find out what your CF3 is. I know what mine is now, that they're growth, impact, and strengths. And now it helps me know that what I want to kind of pass on and where I want to go. And it hit me. I mean, because number one, I'm answering it. So it should follow what I believe in. Guess what? It follows exactly the things that I want in my life right now. And that growth side of it is I want to continue to grow and learn. And that's why I love doing podcasts, because when I bring guests on like Sam Feeney, I learn today. And that's why you're listening today, is to continue that learning process.
And Gary, one thing I'm going to just throw, one thing that the CF3 is so helpful to is if you're not feeling satisfied, you're like, man, like I'm in a funk. Oh, wait a second. You can go back to your results and like, oh, that's why, because I'm focusing on stuff that's outside of it. Right. So when you're in flow, it's because 2 or 3 of those are really humming. But when you're not, you're in a rut. That's where it can be helpful to kind of hold that mirror up to you. I'm like, oh, wait, that's right. I'm ignoring this thing that I love. Why am I doing that?
Yeah. Great advice. Thanks for sharing that. Now, before I let you go, I want to ask you 2 quick questions in the recharge round. The first one is, of course, charge is the mantra of the podcast. That's create habits around real goals every day. What habit do you think's led to you success in your life?
I think it is leveling up the people I hang out with. And that, again, goes to the mastermind. I was often the smartest guy in the room, not because I wanted to be, because I had just taken my foot off the gas of prioritizing that. And that leveling up has just brought so many opportunities in the last year.
Excellent. And of course, we've all had failures and would love to have a do-over. We can't have them in life. We can learn from them. But if you did have that do-over, that fairy would come to you and sprinkle that pixie dust for you, what would that do-over be for you?
I'll say 15 years or so ago, I'm blanking on that. Let's say 13 years ago, I had a course charted out for myself and got sidetracked, by a couple of opportunities that took me off course. And I did not stay focused on my long-term goals. I've gotten back to them. Like this is all stuff I should have done a decade ago. I got totally sidetracked. And I wish I would have had either a mentor or that personal board of advisors to say, does this get you to where you want to go? And I could say, wait, time out. This isn't it. So time wasted, unfortunately. That was a tough one.
It's about having a plan, but then it's having someone that helps hold you accountable plan. And business owners, that challenge because you're going down a road and you've kind of got a plan, and then you take a little diverge on that plan, and then that goes down a rabbit hole that really you can be 3 to 5 years later and you're down that rabbit hole, not going there.
And it's not bad. It's just different from what you said was important. And it's having somebody to remind you of what you said was important.
I think we've all had some of those. I mean, one of mine was in 2006. I was luckily, I said I wanted to be a very active father and be a good father for my children. And I was chasing success. And luckily I saw the light. It's not like I was a perfect dad. I'm still not a perfect dad, but you know what? I made some radical changes in 2006 after I realized that. And I feel so much better about it today. Now we'll have to ask my kids if that's true. I think they'll.
You can only control one half of that equation, Gary.
I know my wife would say that I made a change.
All right, good.
And like I said, no perfection. We're not looking for perfection.
No.
But I found out what was more important. It wasn't just success. It was really about my family life. And
that's so important for me, is that legacy piece of it. It really changes your perspective. If you think, what's going to outlast me? Maybe it's your business. Definitely your family.
Well, Sam, I know you and I could talk for days, but we better go because we know our Chargers are busy people, but we'll have you back another time and we'll get deeper into the book. I just want to thank you for joining us today on the Charge Podcast.
Yeah, I had a ton of fun, Gary, and I hope this was helpful for the people who were listening in. If you get that quiz, my email will be in your results. So if you need anything, just find me there.
Okay, excellent. Chargers. Now, I always try to tell you what's one action item. The action item I'll give you. Go take the quiz. I don't care who you are. We're going to have it in show notes at chargepodcast.com. It's quiz.thecareerfactors.com. But don't worry about it. It's in chargepodcast.com. Just hit that link and then go take the quiz. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're late stage of your career, if you're the business owner, if you're one of the leaders in the company, if you're just an individual and somehow you've come onto this podcast, go take the assessment. I think you'll see value in it. Like I told you, I've already taken it for myself and it rang true. And it really helped me kind of see a light on a couple of things that I want to do better in. So that's where we learn. So we'll be back next week with another great guest. Come join us. Please, this is one, like and share this podcast and then share it with others. One thing I highly recommend you do is hit those 3 little dots at the bottom and share it with 3 of your friends, because when it shows up on their text message, guess what? It gives them a chance to be able to listen to it and learn from it too. So we'll see you next week, Chargers. Make it a great day.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.